just start. Start small, start where it hurts, or start where you build something new.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Innovation Podcast. Today, we are diving into the data contract space and why they are becoming so important in modern data platforms. To explore this topic, I am joined today by Simon Harrer.
Mm-hmm.
Simon,
hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Simon, tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Simon, and I'm a software engineer at Harrer, who's moved to the world of data a few years back. And my mission is somehow transferring the software engineering practices into the world of data. And data contracts are obviously quite relevant for that, because we had API contracts for a long time in the software engineering world. And data contracts are a little bit like transferring those concepts into the data world, but also adapting for the data world, because it's a little different.
A little different. This is one of the things that we want to explore today. A little bit explanation about the definition you have already made, but I am especially interested about knowing a central definition, or how you can define this in simple words, and how this is differentiating to another traditional topics or approaches like data validation or, let's say, documentation.
Yeah, I think data contracts combine a lot of those approaches into a single source of truth of metadata for protecting, specifying a data set someone shares. So let's say I want to share data. I put the data on, let's say, a Snowflake. In a schema, I have two tables there. And the data contract essentially captures all the relevant metadata, and includes the schema, obviously, but also data quality checks that I guarantee that you can rely on if you use my data. And these are guaranteed. So you can rely on, you can trust the data, because you can say, this quality will be sufficient, will be held. These SLAs will be held because I put them in there, and I guarantee you basically these quality constraints. And then that's why you can build upon that data for your use cases. And this also covers things like terms of use. So if I put in there, it's not really critical data, then you can rely on that there's no critical data in there, and you can work with it more easily. But if I put in there, there are PII data in there, it's what you have to do. You have to take certain measures to work with the data. So it's really the contract is part of documentation of my guarantees. It's you can automatically check all these quality checks. So it's a little bit of the data quality tool space. And it's part of the marketplace space, because you can request access to the data protected by a data contract. And in the contract, there says which roles you have to shop. So everything comes together in the contract, so to say, because it makes sense to put them together at the boundary. Because you are just interested in all the metadata to use the data I share, from your consumer perspective, and that's why it's from the consumer perspective to put trust in data.
That means it is solving a big problem what we have had until now, when in reference to governance, in reference to ownership, for example. As you explained, when I am the consumer, and I am using this data, it is important to know for example, the ownership, as I already mentioned, let's say the clear pipeline. Is this solving this problem as well? Like the ownership. To take this example, is data contracts solving also this problem, which is very popular, let's say, nowadays?
it's not a fairy dust that solves ownership magically in a company. But when you think about that, if you find someone who says, "I'll take responsible for the data, I'll be held responsible for the guarantees in the data contract," then you have solved the ownership problem. So it basically makes it explicit what people are willing to guarantee. I think that's critical. If you don't find anybody who gives you guarantees, then you basically have an empty data contract. And that also shows you something. No, but it doesn't magically solve the ownership problem.
It doesn't solve it, but it makes clear who is the owner and the responsible for this data. I think this is a very, very good point, because typically we know that this is something what is in some organizations unsolved. That the ownership, or let's say the pipelines as well, that they are reliable. These are some typical, I call them problems, which are present, and this is being, let's say, captured with the data contract. Great. And I mean, the answer is already somehow given, but maybe summarized. Why do you think they are, or let's explain to our audience, why data contracts are becoming so important in modern data platforms or ecosystems?
I think because the data world is now also adopting the decentralization approach. So instead of having a single team handling all the data in your company, everybody who owns data, or smaller teams that have from the operational space, but also smaller teams in the analytical space, they are responsible for just a small amount of data, and they share it on. So you have a lot of team boundaries. And precisely at these team boundaries, you need to establish trust. And data contracts are basically the tool to make that explicit, and by making it explicit, to solve the trust issue there at the boundaries between teams.
Great. Okay. Yes, it's somehow when you are explaining this, it's getting clear and clear. And yes, that these are typical problems which are being solved with this. Now, let us explore about the companies who already know why they are important, the data contracts, and are having struggles or struggling with the implementation. What are the typical mistakes that organizations are doing currently by the implementation of data contracts? And maybe you can give them 1 or 2 recommendations about how to avoid those mistakes.
Yeah, good question. I think the 2 mistakes I see. So the one is to say, we have to do it right the first time, and then invest a lot of time and energy to define how you want to introduce data contracts. What is the data contract in my company? Customizing it, discussing around that, and just basically pushing the time when you first try it out quite a lot, and that's where you don't have any benefit for a long time. So this is one mistake I see. So my suggestion would be just start small, start where it hurts, or start where you build something new, because then try it out, learn, and you immediately have value with the contracts. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that some companies say, let's introduce it everywhere at once. So everybody has to do now data contracts. And that's also not a good approach, because it creates a lot of bureaucracy with in like 80% of the cases with no value. Why should you just do it just to have data contracts? No, you need something out of the contracts. And I think that's critical. So again, the answer is basically the same. Start small, start where it hurts, or start where you build something new, which is important, like new important stuff. And then you have the benefits immediately. Because if you build something new, or you have, or where in the boundary is hurting you, and you have issues with data quality, it makes sense to make everything explicit, to have the boundary really clear. What do the consumers really need? What data quality guarantees do they need? What SLAs do you have to fulfill? You have to do that anyway. So why not just use a contract, use the automation around it, and then you have immediate benefits. I think that's my general advice. Just try it out, because there's nothing really stopping you. It's so low key to just get going. And that's the awesomeness around data contracts. Actually, you don't need infrastructure. You don't need anything else. The only thing you want to share data from one team to another, and that's where you can start using data contracts.
What would need as well would be the explanation and the understanding about this, because I think it is a similarly new topic or new, let's say, new approach. Yeah. And even for me now, for the preparation of this podcast, it was like, okay, amazing, because it is, as you mentioned at the beginning, it is putting together different approaches. Maybe somebody have heard about this or those approaches, but now to have this in one definition, in one place, it will need, of course, for the introduction some time for getting, let's say, confident with those approaches or with those definitions. But as you said, for the implementation, you just need, let's say, you just need the willing to start, of course, and to know the, let's say, basics about those data, no? Who is the owner or the lineage, let's say.
Yeah, the contract or the structure of the contract, let's say if you're using the standard, like the open data contract standard, gives you a lot of hints what you should put in the contract and where to put them, because it already has its structure. So you can guide yourself, no? Or if you use maybe the open source data contract editor, provides a web UI, it helps you fill in the right things at the right places, and then just be guided by that standard and by the tools around that. So actually, it's not that complicated, but still, I agree. When you first get started, it makes sense to have like a workshop with the facilitator who has experience using data contracts. You don't need a lot of these workshops to get going, but just maybe 1 or 2 or 3, and they give you as a facilitator, they guide you in creating your first contracts and guide the discussion around that. And I think that helps. And that could be done by INFOMOTION as a consultancy company, or that's a perfect candidate actually for these workshops.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I appreciated this point of view as well. Great. And okay, now we understood that this is an important approach, that this is solving several known problems. Where do you see data contracts evolving in 3 to 5 years?
That's a good question. What we are currently seeing that they evolve towards AI. So we see that they will have more and more information just so that AI can work even better with contracts. So contracts are already great for AI because they contain so much important metadata, and if the AI knows that, it can understand the data offering much better, and then can fire SQL queries or evaluate whether that data set is actually worth requesting access to. But even there, we see a lot of requests to say, let's put in additional context for AI. Let's put in, let's say, questions with verified answers around the data set in. So AI has these example questions and queries to say, okay, this is what you would use the data for, and also limitations, what you're not allowed to do with the data. So this is one part. And the other part is it moves towards the semantic world. Things like ontology. So think of you define like a order ID once in your ontology, and it could be part of several contracts. Because the order ID is in an e-commerce world, for instance, it's everywhere in so many tables. But you only want to define it once, and then from each contract, you just point to that definition of the order ID. So this is where we see that. And we also see it pushes for other standards like the open semantic interchange, which was led by Snowflake and is now much more broad. For the semantic models, but which is think of like combining several data contracts optimized for BI or agentic AI in the BI world. So these are trends we see, but overall, what I see a huge adoption for data contracts. We see that more like large vendors have now announced this year that they support data contracts using the open data contract standard, which is kind of the de facto standard and the winner in the contract format war, so to say. And we see a huge amount of adoption. And that's what my prophecy for the future is that data contracts will take the data world by storm. They already started, but we will see the hockey stick of adoption. And my comparison is that of Open API, which is now everywhere in the operational software engineering world. And I think data contracts will have a similar place in the data world in a few years' time.
Wow, amazing, interesting. Yes, I think similar. That's right. It's evolving, and many people or more people is understanding the importance as well to knowing that, because as you said, it is very related as well to decentralization, data decentralization. No? Typically, many organizations have a data team centralized where let's say everything is clear, who is the owner and so on. But when you are starting to move to the departments, to the individual departments, of course, you will be needing to handle with this, with those topics. You already mentioned the standards, and maybe you can give us a bit introduction. What is included in those standards?
Yeah, so the Open Data Contract Standard, the main standard for data contracts, was originally created at PayPal and then donated or open sourced and then donated to the Linux Foundation. And then it was converted so the PayPal specifics were removed to make it applicable for every company on the planet. And so it contains the key part of obviously is the data schema, which tables are there, which columns. But you also have ways to define data quality checks in SQL or using libraries like Great Expectations or Soda, or even just in textual form. Might be with AI, it's easy to just run that as well. You can define service level agreements like latency, data retention, freshness of data. And you can define terms of use. So think of the purpose or limitation. So what can you do with the data? What are you not allowed to do with the data? Perhaps
this is important. And I think this is one aspect what frequently forgotten as well. What can you not do with this data? Yes.
Yeah. I think that's crucial, actually, because data sometimes has, license agreements. So if you buy weather data, you're not allowed to do everything with the weather data inside your company. No, you can't just reshare it outside of the company, for instance, just an example. Or for statistics data or other data you buy. And then we have the GDPR topic, where the analysis of data is quite restricted. You're not just allowed, just because you have access to data doesn't mean you are allowed to do what you plan to do with the data. And I think what's interesting here is that the purpose or purpose-based access control is becoming more and more important, because we have to double check the purpose, what you want with the data against, the data offering. And the data contract can help in that. So you can use your purpose, which if you want to do with the data, and you can check it against what's in the contract, whether it matches. And there are a lot of cool new things that are possible there.
Wow. It sounds very promising for the future of data as well, no? And the usage and the, let's say, the trusted usage, because at the end of the day, it is about this. It is about using trusted data, as you said, reliability, quality, and it contains a lot of aspects which are so important. Yeah, this is really, really great to experience this with you and to learn this from you. Thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us this knowledge, your experience, sharing, and maybe one last question. And at this place, I will say a big hug to Peter Baumann. Is a data contract a contract?
Excellent question. With a backstory here, with a popular LinkedIn post by Peter of a picture of me at around 1,000 likes or so on LinkedIn. And it's a good question. So typically a data contract is basically mostly guarantees from me as the data owner, data provider. And it's one-sided at first. It's just my guarantees, and I maybe have some expectations towards potential consumers, but I don't know the consumers yet. So it's not like a contract in the legal term where you have one party and another party. It's more like I guarantee that it's my contract with the platform, and yeah, that's why that topic really was triggered. But actually, of course, it's a contract. It's contractual because I promise that, and I will hold up to my promise. So that contractual part is still valid. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Yes, and I said thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us as well. If you have any question or, let's say, questions, comments about this topic, please do it in the comment function. And thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.